What's going on, Wes? How are you, man?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. It's good to have you, too. So, biggest takeaway from last night's game, another close one for Miami. Lose a tough one, basically, at the buzzer. Tyler misses the game-winning three. What were your biggest takeaways from last night?
Well, the big one was I thought that the Cavaliers win was one of the better wins for the Heat all season. The Cavs are obviously a playoff team. They're looking like Eastern Conference contenders for large parts of the season. They're fully healthy, and the Heat just haven't had like a lot of those kinds of like quality wins. And then you had a chance to do the same thing against the Knicks, and you didn't. Losing that game, they were really disappointed. Talking to the coaches and the players afterwards, like it wasn't the most impatient and maybe the most upset that they've been this year, but it kind of reminded me of like those losses to San Antonio in Miami and stuff. Like they thought that they should have had that game, which I was a little surprised by, honestly, because I didn't think they played all that well outside of Bam, and Max Strus hit a couple of shots, and other than that, but the fact that they even had an opportunity there with Tyler Hero to take that shot from the corner to go for the win there with that three-pointer, the fact that they even were able to get it that close again, I thought was pretty surprising because I didn't think they played well at all. I didn't think they had any business winning last night's game. So just the fact that they had a chance to steal one on the road like that was all of that was surprising to me, including the reaction afterwards and just sort of how, again, how disappointed the team just felt, because it felt like I think they felt like they were building on stuff. And obviously this game has so much meaning in the standings when you're looking at Miami being 6 and the Knicks being 7. So I think they went in there thinking that they were going to win, and I don't think Spo was happy with overall just the performance that they put together.
Wes, what do you think they're going to do with Kyle? Like, this is, a couple of first halves back-to-back. He hasn't scored. He's now basically not playing in the fourth quarter. I don't know, man. It feels like Spo's almost starting him just out of respect for the name, but the fit just doesn't seem to be there right now. Do you feel like he's going to be here past the trade deadline? And if he is, how do they figure out how to utilize him?
So my sense is that they've been pretty open about talking to other teams about possible trades. The hard thing about Lowry is I don't really know the deal that makes sense. I don't know. I know that like the Timberwolves trade has sort of been out there for D'Angelo Russell. I don't know that D'Angelo Russell is a fit in Miami culture-wise and all those kind of things. And then obviously there's the Clippers out there. They're looking for a point guard. That to me makes the most sense. But Kyle Lowry's not at the top of their list. I think they're going to be looking for somebody like Fred VanVleet or even Mike Conley. But if they don't want to part with the draft capital, or if they're unable to get one of those guys, then maybe Kyle Lowry is an option for them. But when you're really looking what that trade would look like, you're probably not getting much draft capital back, if anything. Maybe some second rounders or just something like that. No first round picks. You're probably getting somebody like Reggie Jackson or Robert Covington or maybe a Luke Kennard or a Marcus Morris back, who are, they're fine. They're like okay rotation players. But you're not really going out and getting a real difference maker if you're trading Kyle Lowry. That said, there could be some motivation by the Heat to just get rid of Kyle Lowry because of his contract, right? Because this is a team that has a couple of extensions kicking in next year. They're going to be deep into the tax. They need to find ways to save money. And if Kyle Lowry, I think it's gone a little bit too negative against him from the fan base a little bit. I think he's still a hopeful player, but he's also not worth the almost $30 million that you're paying him right now production-wise. And he's just not producing. He's not producing. Like you said, he's not playing in fourth quarters anymore. I do think that he's dropped down in the pecking order. I mean, last year he was just in Sharpie, part of the closing lineup, and he's not that anymore. And that's everything that you need to know. Spoelstra can go up there in post-game press conference and say, hey, he's our QB1, Hall of Fame quarterback, blah, 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 nothing but respect, future Hall of Famer. But actions speak louder than words, and you're not playing this dude in the most important moments of games anymore. And that, to me, is meaningful, and it means to me that Kyle Lowry is no longer part of the core of this team. And then that presents those other questions is, okay, if he's not part of the core, do we trade him? And what does that kind of deal look like? And what would we be willing to give him up for, if only just to get some of that cap saving next year? And if you're making a move like that, what does that say about this year? If you're making moves to try to save money for next year.
I just think the thing that's become fascinating with him is that I got the idea of having him last year. It was almost like, training wheels for your two young guys in Bam and Tyler. I don't feel like they need him anymore. I feel like the chemistry that Tyler and Bam have together, on top of, Tyler's growth as a playmaker and Vic being a contributor this year, I just feel like he's kind of phased out. I don't know how much he has left in the tank, and I agree with you. It's probably turned to negative. I don't necessarily even think this is a Kyle's washed thing. I don't know how good a fit he is here anymore.
That's exactly it. I mean, he's talked about this. He's like, okay, more of my shots now are sort of the catch and shoot variety. I've got to play off the ball a little bit more and try to figure out a rhythm offensively in that way. And look, those opportunities are there. Like, he's getting the shots. I don't even know if it's like a in rhythm thing. Those shots just aren't going in, and maybe it's part of maybe it's his age. He's front rimming these 3-pointers and stuff like that. But even beyond that, the offense last year, the one that Kyle Lowry joined as a free agent, that was built around Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler doing their high basketball IQ, bully ball kind of offense. That is not the offense that he is part of anymore. Now it is Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, two-man game, pick and roll stuff. Jimmy Butler finding his spots off of that, and then Kyle Lowry having to find his spots off of that. Like this, the offense goes through Tyler and Bam now. So I agree with you completely. Like he's not really needed. I think even if you traded Kyle Lowry, I don't think that you even elevate Gabe Vincent into the starting lineup. The way this offense runs now, you just move Tyler back to point guard, put somebody else at shooting guard. Maybe it's Victor Oladipo. You give him the starting job. But the offense is still going to be Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo running that pick and roll. And there's enough playmaking now between Tyler, between Bam, between Jimmy that just like Kyle Lowry is so unselfish that it's become not a fit in the offense. It's almost to a fault now because you just need players to be unselfish and take those shots that the main triggers of the offense, which again are the Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo pick and roll, Jimmy Butler post-ups, those main triggers are getting you those shots. And now Kyle Lowry is less of a shot creator and he has to be more of a shot maker. And that's just never really been what he's done in the NBA. And so I think it's been an adjustment for him. And if you could repurpose that money and that salary cap slot and all that stuff to somebody who's more of a fit, then I think if you're the Heat, you kind of have to look at that.
Talking to Wes Goldberg, you guys catch him on Locked On Heat. Does a fantastic job with David Meal covering the Heat every single game. They do a great job on their YouTube page and all podcast platforms. One more before we get you out of here, man.
Yeah.
You seem Jimmy Butler. You think he got snubbed on the All-Star game. Great. We're happy Bam made it, but you feel like Jimmy Butler should have as well.
Jimmy Butler should have made it. I understand if it's the availability thing, but once Zion made it as a starter in the West, games played didn't matter anymore. Like that was, and so the fact that there were so many issues with all the reserves, honestly. But if we're talking about Jimmy Butler, like there's also that argument. Well, if Jimmy Butler, of course he's an all-star, but if he got snubbed and you think he should be on, who should be off? And usually that's a pretty good argument. It's like, yeah, you know what? There's only a limited amount of reserves. There's only a limited amount of all-star spots. But in this case, like Julius Randle over Jimmy Butler, come on. Like Drew Holiday, I get a little bit, but like there's even DeMar DeRozan has had a nice year for Chicago, but I don't look at the Bulls as being like one of these teams that needs to have an all-star on there. If you want to do the Julius Randle argument, you're like, all right, the Knicks get one, the Heat get one all-star. Like, okay, we could do that. Like, the Bulls don't deserve an all-star. And DeMar DeRozan's been fine. But Jimmy Butler's been awesome when he's on the court. And last night was not a good showing by Jimmy Butler, so we didn't really back that up at all. But I thought it was ridiculous. Like, Jimmy Butler's an all-star. He should be in there. And so he got snubbed. But I do want to try to focus the conversation a little bit on All-Star, on Bam Adebayo making it, because he got snubbed last year. And the fact that Bam made it is huge. And I think it's very meaningful, by the way, that when the coaches had to give the Heat an All-Star, because you look at the reserves that they picked, and they're like, all right, each team gets an All-Star. When the coaches were looking at who did the Heat get, they didn't go with Jimmy. They went with Bam. And that, to me, is pretty significant when we're talking about Bam's status in the league and the respect that he's getting from coaches, rival players, and things like that. The players voted Bam really high. The coaches voted him really high. The national media voted Bam really high. Bam doesn't really have the fan support that he needed. That was the issue with in terms of him getting more votes and getting into one of the starting spots potentially. But I think the fans will catch up next year. But he's got nothing but respect, the utmost respect from people who know ball across the league.
Appreciate the time. Where are you going to eat? What do you got going on there? What are we waiting for?
I just had lunch. I'm still in New York, so I apologize for some of the background noise here. I tried
Not
to
a problem at all.
It was either this or stand in the 20-degree weather. So I was like, you know what? They could deal with a little bit of background noise.
Are you? What did you like? Because it kind of looks like a Flanagan's, but obviously it's New York, so it's not. What did you? Eat for lunch?
Flanagan's would be wonderful. What is this place called? The Malt House. The Malt House. I just had a buffalo chicken sandwich. It was solid. Yeah.
Man. Good. Are you going to Milwaukee or are you on your way back here?
I'm coming back tomorrow morning. Back to Miami. No more cold weather for me.
All right, buddy. Safe travels. Thank you for giving us some time.
Thanks, guys.
There you go. Wes Goldberg. Check him out. Locked On Heat.